Mr. Johnson, when your bank makes a loan, the person who borrows the money will typically spend it. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Keynes. There's no sense in taking out a loan and paying interest unless you're going to spend it.
And if the person who has borrowed from your bank purchases a shovel at the hardware store, the shopkeeper will typically deposit his receipts in another bank.
Yes, that's right. The other bank's deposits will rise just as mine have fallen.
Precisely. Your bank is weakened by the loan, while the other bank is strengthened.
That's one way of putting it. What's your point?
My point is that if all banks moved forward together, if you all increased your lending in step, then none of your banks would be weakened.
No, that's not the way it works. Banks are subject to the forces of the marketplace. I'm sure you've heard of supply and demand. I have no control over these taskmasters.
The market forces you speak of are nothing more than your fellow bank chairmen sitting in their separate boardrooms complaining about the weak economy and refusing to make loans.
Look, I realize that bankers are an easy target. But the fact is that workers are unemployed because wages are too high. It's simply not profitable for my bank to hire more loan officers if the extra revenue they produce is not enough to pay their wages.
You think lower wages would do the trick, do you?
Yes. Quite frankly, I do. If wages were cut by 10%, unemployment would disappear by Easter.
Do you propose to cut all workers' pay by 10%, or just your own workers' pay?
I've got enough trouble running my own business. I don't care what other businessmen pay their employees.
Well, I think you should care.
And why is that?
If I'm not mistaken, your bank makes loans to people who are employed by other businessmen.
Yes, of course we do.
And if the wages of your customers, the people who borrow from your bank, were cut by 10%, wouldn't some of these workers fall behind on their loan payments? Indeed, wouldn't some of them even go into default on their mortgages?
That's already happened, and I'm afraid it's getting worse.
Well, then, it seems that you do, in fact, have a rather pressing interest in how much workers in general are paid.
Yes, I suppose you're right.
Of course you're not alone in this predicament. If wages were cut by 10% across the board, other businesses would also suffer. When incomes fall, people reduce their spending. And then businessmen like yourself lose money and, eventually, you must let some employees go. This is the regrettable path that has brought us to this dismal state of affairs.